Jane Keller, 28, a nurse from Boston with calloused hands and a broken heart. The mahogany conference table at Parker and Wells law firm felt endless that day, as my grandfather Harold's will was read. We were close, despite my family's disapproval. When Attorney Wells announced my inheritance was just $1, my parents couldn't hide their smirks. I wanted to disappear until those unexpected words changed everything. There's also a private letter for Jane. Their laughter stopped cold. If you're watching this from somewhere dealing with family drama too, let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to find out how one letter changed everything in my life. Growing up in the Keller family meant understanding one thing early: appearances mattered above all else. Our colonial-style home in Brookline, with its manicured gardens and marble countertops, wasn't just a place to live, it was a statement. My parents, Amanda and Gary Keller, built their identities around wealth, status, and what others thought of them. Mom headed 3 charity boards, but complained about the beneficiaries when she came home. Dad expanded the family investment firm, but regularly called his clients suckers behind closed doors. Then there was me, the disappointment. From childhood, I preferred books to shopping. Volunteered at animal shelters instead of attending debutante classes, and eventually chose nursing over the family business. Each choice widened the gap between us until it became a canyon too vast to bridge. A Keller does not wear scrubs, my mother declared when I announced my nursing school acceptance. We build wealth, not change bedpans. My father was equally cutting. You could manage an entire hospital wing, but instead you want to work in one? This education is a waste. But there was one person who saw me differently: Grandfather Harold. A self-made man who built his fortune from a single hardware store. He never forgot what it meant to work with his hands. Your heart is your greatest asset, Janie, he told me on my 16th birthday, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. In this family of accountants, we need at least one person who can count what truly matters. My earliest memories of him involve his weathered tackle box and dawn fishing trips to Walden Pond. While my parents networked at country clubs, Grandfather taught me patience, listening to the water's rhythm as we waited for fish to bite. See how the ripples move, Janie? Life's like that. One small action affects everything around it. Remember that when you're caring for people someday. He knew before I did that I'd choose a helping profession. When I graduated high school, he gave me an antique stethoscope that had belonged to his mother. She was a nurse during World War II, he explained. Bravest person I ever knew. When I was accepted to nursing school, my parents threatened to cut financial support. That same day, Grandfather Harold called with news that he'd established an education fund just for me. Your compassion isn't weakness, he insisted. It's the kind of strength this family has forgotten. Throughout nursing school, our Sunday brunches became my sanctuary. He'd listen intently as I described challenging patients or difficult procedures, offering wisdom from his decades of managing people, business or healthcare. It's all about understanding human needs, he'd say. The difference is you're meeting the ones that actually matter. As his health declined in his final years, our roles reversed. I became his advocate, joining him for specialist appointments and translating medical jargon. When congestive heart failure forced him into hospice care, I arranged my shifts to maximize our time together. My parents visited monthly at most, usually for brief, awkward appearances. My brother Ethan came when guilt overwhelmed him, though he clearly found the medical environment unsettling. Aunt Barbara, Harold's daughter, called frequently but lived in California and visited only twice. Meanwhile, I spent hours by his bedside, reading his favorite Hemingway novels or simply sitting in comfortable silence. Sometimes I'd arrive to find him watching the door as if he'd been waiting. "There she is," he'd say with a tired smile. "The only color worth a damn." In his final month, he became more reflective, often mentioning his will and legacy. "I've been thinking about what we leave behind," he said one evening, his voice weaker but his eyes sharp as ever. "Not the things, but the lessons." "Don't talk like that," I said, adjusting his oxygen tube. "You've got plenty of time to philosophize." He patted my hand. "Money is a funny thing, Janie. It shows who people really are. Remember that." I didn't understand the significance of those words then. I was focused on his comfort, not cryptic messages about inheritance. Besides, I never expected much from his estate. My parents had made it clear that the bulk would go to Ethan to expand the family business, with substantial portions to themselves and Aunt Barbara. "Your grandfather understands business succession," my father reminded me repeatedly. "The money needs to stay where it can grow." The morning grandfather Harold passed, I was holding his hand, having rushed to hospice after my night shift. My parents arrived 2 hours later, already on their phones making arrangements and notifications. Ethan showed genuine grief, at least. Aunt Barbara flew in that evening. At the funeral, I noticed how quickly conversations turned from memories to money. Cousin Tyler asked my father about timeline expectations for accessing funds. My mother cornered Attorney Wells about scheduling the reading. Even people I barely recognized approached me with suspicious kindness, as if I might somehow influence their portion. Through it all, I kept thinking about our last coherent conversation, 3 days before he passed. "You've always seen people for who they are, not what they can give you," he'd said. "Don't lose that, no matter what happens next." I'd nodded, assuming he was imparting general wisdom. Now, heading into the will reading, his words replayed in my mind with new significance. Had he known how the family would behave? Was he trying to prepare me for disappointment? Either way, I entered Parker and Wells' law firm with low expectations, but a heart full of genuine grief. The grandfather who had championed me was gone, and no inheritance could change that fundamental loss. Parker and Wells' law firm occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston, with views of the harbor that would have impressed anyone not consumed by anticipation. The conference room featured the obligatory mahogany table, leather chairs, and law books lining built-in shelves, all designed to convey stability and tradition. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a simple black dress that had served for both the funeral and job interviews. My parents, predictably, showed up in designer mourning wear that somehow managed to look both appropriate and ostentatious. "Jane," my mother said, air kissing near my cheek, "you could have worn something more suitable. This is an important family occasion." My father merely nodded in my direction before checking his watch and striding toward Attorney Lawrence Wells, who stood greeting family members at the door. Wells was in his 60s, with silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd witnessed countless family dramas unfold in this very room. He had been my grandfather's attorney for over 30 years and one of his closest friends. "Jane," he said warmly when I approached, taking both my hands. "Harold spoke of you often. My deepest condolences." Something in his expression, a mixture of kindness and what might have been anticipation, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, my brother Ethan arrived. At 32, Ethan embodied the Keller success story: Wharton MBA, tailored suit, the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where he belonged in the world. Yet as he hugged me, I felt a moment of genuine connection. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Managing," I replied. "You?" "Busy," he said. Which was Ethan's speak for, "I'm burying my feelings in work." He squeezed my shoulder before moving to greet our parents. Aunt Barbara arrived with her twin children, my cousins Tyler and Heather. At 49, Barbara looked remarkably like my father, with the same angular features and calculating eyes. She'd flown in from her San Francisco tech executive position, clearly annoyed at the interruption to her schedule. "Let's hope this doesn't drag on," she muttered after a brief, stiff hug. "My flight back is tomorrow morning." Tyler and Heather, both in their mid-20s, had the disaffected air of people who had grown up with enough money to be bored by it. Tyler checked his phone constantly while Heather applied lip gloss, neither bothering to acknowledge me until their mother prodded them. As everyone settled around the table, I observed the obvious hierarchy. My parents took positions directly across from Attorney Wells, with Ethan beside them. Aunt Barbara sat to Wells' immediate left. I chose a seat near the end, beside my cousins, feeling like the audience rather than a participant. The energy in the room was unmistakable, anticipation mixed with performance. Everyone except Wells and myself seemed to be playing roles. The grieving but dignified children, the respectful grandson poised to take the mantle, the composed niece and her respectable offspring. Only I felt genuinely hollowed by grief, still processing the absence of the one person who had truly seen me. My mind drifted to the funeral 3 days earlier. The service had been impeccable. Of course, my mother would accept nothing less. The flower arrangements, the selected readings, the catered reception afterward, all perfect. What wasn't perfect was the hushed conversation I overheard between my parents during the reception. Harold assured me the distribution would be appropriate, my father had said, sipping scotch in a corner they thought private. The business assets to Ethan, the majority of liquid investments split between us and Barbara, properties divided accordingly. And Jane? My mother had asked. Something suitable for her situation. Nothing that would be wasted. The memory burned as Attorney Wells cleared his throat and opened a leather portfolio. "Thank you all for coming today," he began formally. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Harold James Keller, as finalized 6 months ago and properly witnessed. 6 months ago, when grandfather's health had begun its final decline. When I'd started spending evenings at hospice, while my parents continued their social obligations." Wells proceeded through the legal preliminaries, his voice a practiced monotone until he reached the actual distributions. "To my grandson, Ethan Gary Keller." I leave all shares and interests in Keller Investments Limited, with the expectation that he will honor the company's founding principles of integrity and community investment." Ethan nodded solemnly, though I noticed my father's hand clap his shoulder with unmistakable satisfaction. To my daughter, Barbara Keller Wilson. I leave my properties in Nantucket and the Berkshires, along with the sum of $2 million. Aunt Barbara's expression didn't change, though she uncrossed and recrossed her legs, a tell I recognized from childhood that meant she was calculating if the amount met her expectations. To my son, Gary Harold Keller, and his wife, Amanda Pierce Keller, I leave my remaining investment portfolio valued at approximately $7.4 million, my Boston residence, and my collection of antique maps. My father actually smiled at this, while my mother pressed her hand to her chest in a gesture of gratitude that seemed rehearsed. I noticed neither mentioned grandfather by name, only the assets and their value. Wells continued through smaller bequests, charitable donations, gifts to longtime staff, a generous pension for his housekeeper Maria. As each item was ticked off the list, I became increasingly aware that my name hadn't been mentioned. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. Tyler glanced at me with poorly disguised curiosity. My mother studied her manicure with unusual intensity. My father checked his watch again, his expression suggesting he was mentally tallying the total value distributed so far. I felt a growing hollowness in my chest. Had grandfather truly left me nothing? After all our conversations, our connection, the promises that he was proud of me, I told myself it shouldn't matter. His love had been real, regardless of material expressions. But surrounded by family members receiving millions, the omission stung in ways I hadn't anticipated. Just as Wells appeared to be concluding, he turned a page and paused. "There is one final bequest," he said, and everyone's attention snapped back to him. I felt the weight of multiple gazes turning in my direction. To my granddaughter, Jane Elizabeth Keller, Attorney Wells read, his voice suddenly carrying new weight, "I leave the sum of $1. The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning registered. $1. A single, symbolic dollar. I felt heat rush to my face as I struggled to process what I'd just heard. The conference room seemed to tilt slightly, the polished table swimming before my eyes as I gripped the arms of my chair. $1. My mother's voice broke the silence, a perfect blend of false sympathy and vindication. "Is that correct, Lawrence?" "That is what the will states," Wells confirmed, his expression unreadable. I forced myself to look up and immediately wished I hadn't. My father wore a smirk so satisfied it transformed his entire face, making him almost unrecognizable. My mother's eyes gleamed with something between triumph and pity as she exchanged glances with Aunt Barbara. "Well," my father said, clearing his throat. Harold always was practical about where his assets would be best utilized. The implication was unmistakable. I hadn't earned more. My career choice, my values, my very identity had been judged and found wanting by the one person I thought had accepted me unconditionally. "I'm sure your grandfather had his reasons," my mother added, her voice dripping with false compassion. "Perhaps he felt you had already received your portion through your education fund." Beside me, Cousin Tyler snickered before disguising it as a cough. Heather studied her nails, a small smile playing at her lips. "Dad, come on," Ethan interjected, surprising me. "This isn't necessary." But the damage was done. Years of feeling like an outsider in my own family crystallized in that moment. Every dismissive comment about my career, every concerned question about my modest apartment, every comparison to more financially successful peers, all validated by this final message from beyond the grave. My mind raced through recent interactions with grandfather, searching for signs I'd missed. Had there been disappointment in his eyes when I described my promotion to charge nurse instead of pursuing a medical degree? Had he secretly agreed with my parents that I was wasting my potential? Had our closeness been merely my imagination? No, I couldn't believe that. Just 3 weeks before his death, he'd held my hand and told me he was proud of the woman I'd become. "You have courage, Janie," he'd said. "The courage to live by your own measure of success." Had those been empty words? A kindness to a granddaughter he'd actually deemed unworthy? "I think we should move on," Aunt Barbara said briskly. "We all have arrangements to make regarding our inheritances." Our inheritances. The phrase excluded me so completely it felt like another slap. I considered leaving, standing up, and walking out with whatever dignity I could salvage. What reason was there to stay and endure more of this humiliation? I shifted in my chair, preparing to excuse myself. "Actually," Attorney Wells said, raising a hand slightly, "I must ask everyone to remain seated. There are additional matters to discuss." My father frowned. "The distributions have been made, Lawrence. What else is there?" Wells didn't answer him directly. Instead, he reached into his portfolio and removed a weathered envelope, yellowed slightly with age. Harold left specific instructions that, following the reading of his will, I should deliver this private letter to Jane, he said, his eyes finding mine. He was most insistent about the timing. The room went completely still. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father's expression hardened into something dangerous. "A letter?" Aunt Barbara echoed. "What kind of letter?" "A private communication between Harold and his granddaughter," Wells replied evenly. "As specified in my instructions as executor." "That seems highly irregular," my father said, his voice tight. "Anything pertaining to the estate should be disclosed to all beneficiaries." "This is not directly related to the estate distributions," Wells explained. "It's a personal communication." Harold was quite clear about his wishes. "Then Jane can read it now," my mother suggested, failing to hide her curiosity behind a benevolent smile. "We're all family here." Wells shook his head. Again, my instructions were explicit. "Jane is to read this privately before we conclude today's meeting." He stood and gestured toward a door at the side of the conference room. "Jane, if you'll follow me, you can use my office. Take all the time you need." My legs felt unsteady as I rose from my chair. The envelope in Wells' hand suddenly seemed to be the only real thing in the room. I was vaguely aware of my father beginning to object again, of my mother's tight expression, of Ethan's confused gaze following me. "This is highly unorthodox," my father was saying. "As Harold's son, I have a right." "Gary," Wells interrupted with surprising firmness, "your father's instructions were legally binding. Please respect his wishes." The side door closed behind us, muffling my father's continued protests. Wells led me down a short hallway to his private office, a smaller, more personal space with bookshelves and framed photographs rather than corporate art. "Take your time," he said kindly, placing the envelope in my hands. "I'll ensure you're not disturbed." The envelope felt substantial, made of heavy paper that spoke of quality and permanence. My name was written across the front in grandfather's distinctive handwriting, slanted and precise, with a flourish on the final E that he'd always added. Just seeing it brought tears to my eyes. After Wells left, closing the door softly behind him, I sank into a leather chair and traced my finger over my name. Whatever the envelope contained, it was the last communication I would ever receive from my grandfather. I took a deep breath and carefully broke the seal. Inside was several pages of letter paper, covered in the same familiar handwriting. "My dearest Janie, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I've left this world behind, and you've just been publicly given a $1 inheritance. For that public humiliation, I apologize, but it was necessary for reasons that will soon become clear. Over the past decade, I've watched with increasing concern as wealth has corrupted our family. The Keller name once stood for integrity, hard work, and community. Now, I fear it represents entitlement, manipulation, and hollow values. Your parents, your aunt, even your cousins, all have come to see money as an end rather than a means. They measure worth by bank accounts rather than character. All except you. You, my beloved granddaughter, chose a path of service when ease was available. You developed compassion when callousness would have been simpler. You maintained authenticity when everyone around you wore masks. The $1 bequest was strategic, I'm afraid. Had I publicly named you a primary beneficiary, your life would have become unbearable. The family would have contested the will, pressured you relentlessly, perhaps even manipulated you into surrendering what was rightfully yours. The dollar was protection, a misdirection to allow what comes next. Tomorrow morning, go to First National Bank on State Street. Ask for Marcus Jenkins in the private client department. Bring this letter and your identification. In Safe Deposit Box 1873, you will find everything you need to understand your true inheritance. I know this approach may seem needlessly theatrical or complicated. Perhaps it is. But after decades of observing our family dynamics, I've learned that sometimes wisdom requires strategy. Remember what I told you about ripples in the water? This is my final ripple. What you do with what you find will create ripples of your own. With eternal love and pride. Your grandfather. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming freely down my face. Relief, vindication, and curiosity washed over me in waves. He hadn't betrayed our connection. He hadn't judged me wanting. If anything, he had valued me above all others, enough to create this elaborate plan. After composing myself as best I could, I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Whatever waited in that safe deposit box, I already had what I needed most, confirmation that my grandfather's love had been real, and that he had seen me clearly until the end. I stepped back into the hallway where Wells waited patiently. "Ready to return?" he asked gently. I nodded, feeling a strange new confidence. The letter was tucked securely in my purse, its contents a secret between grandfather and me. When we re-entered the conference room, all conversations stopped immediately. Every face turned toward me, expressions ranging from annoyed to openly curious. "Well," my mother demanded. "What did Harold have to say?" I smiled slightly. Grandfather had some final words for me. They were private. As his son, I think I have a right to know the contents of that letter. My father insisted. "Actually, you don't," Wells interjected smoothly. Harold's instructions regarding the letter were quite specific. "Its contents are for Jane alone." "This is absurd." Aunt Barbara snapped. "Secret letters? Private messages? What kind of estate management is this?" Wells remained unruffled. "A completely legal one, I assure you." "Now, unless there are questions about the distributions as stated in the will, I believe our business here is concluded." As the meeting broke up, I felt the weight of stares following me. My $1 inheritance had transformed from a source of humiliation to a mystery that clearly unsettled the family. Whatever came next, I knew one thing with certainty. Tomorrow morning at the bank would change everything. The lobby of First National Bank gleamed with marble and polished brass when I arrived at 9 the next morning. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions about what might await me in safe deposit box 1873. Grandfather's letter remained securely in my purse, read so many times I'd nearly memorized it. "I'm here to see Marcus Jenkins," I told the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. "In private client services." "Do you have an appointment, miss?" "No, but I believe he's expecting me." "I'm Jane Keller." Something flickered in the receptionist's eyes at my name. "One moment, please." Less than a minute later, a tall man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed beard approached. "Miss Keller? I'm Marcus Jenkins. We've been expecting you. We've been expecting you." The plural wasn't lost on me. Jenkins led me through a secured door into a private area of the bank, more richly appointed than the public lobby. "Your grandfather made arrangements with us several months ago," he explained as we walked. He was quite specific about the protocols. "Did you know him well?" I asked. Jenkins smiled slightly. "I handled his banking for nearly 20 years. He spoke very highly of you." We stopped before a biometric scanner, which Jenkins pressed his hand against. Beyond it lay the safe deposit vault, rows of metal boxes embedded in the walls, their numbered faces gleaming under soft lighting. "I'll need to see the letter and your identification," Jenkins said once we were inside. I handed over my driver's license and grandfather's letter, which Jenkins scanned briefly before nodding. "Perfect. Now, if you'll follow me." Box 1873 was larger than I'd expected, requiring Jenkins to use a stepladder to reach it. He inserted his key, then gestured for me to do the same with the key from the envelope. "I'll give you privacy," he said after we'd placed the heavy metal box on a table in a small adjoining room. "Take as much time as you need." When the door closed behind him, I stared at the box for a long moment, gathering my courage. Whatever grandfather had left me, it represented his final message, his true feelings about my place in the family. With slightly trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside lay another envelope, this one thicker than the first, several legal-looking folders, and a small key labeled Oak Ridge Medical Center, main office. My confusion must have shown on my face even with no one there to see it. I opened the second letter first. My dearest Janie, if you're reading this, you've taken the first step into your new future. I'm proud of you, but not surprised. You've always had more courage than the rest of our family combined. What I'm about to tell you has been in planning for nearly 3 years. Ever since you graduated nursing school with honors while your parents attended that Mediterranean cruise instead of your ceremony. That day, watching you accept your diploma via live stream from my study, I made a decision. The true Keller legacy would flow through you, not through those who merely carry the name without its values. In the folders accompanying this letter, you'll find legal documents transferring ownership of Oak Ridge Medical Center to you, effective immediately. It's a small but thriving facility specializing in community healthcare, particularly for underserved populations. The property and business are valued at approximately $3.8 million debt-free. For the past year, I've been quietly acquiring and improving this facility with you in mind. The current manager, Sophia Martinez, is exceptional and knows everything about my plans for you to take ownership. She's expecting your call. Your nursing experience makes you uniquely qualified to understand the mission of this center, while your compassion ensures you'll steward it with the right values. I've arranged for a management team to handle the business aspects until you decide whether you want to learn those elements yourself. This is not a burden, Janie. It's an opportunity to create the kind of impact I know you've always wanted to make. The facility is already profitable and serves a vital community need. What you choose to do with it now is entirely your decision. You may wonder why I've handled your inheritance this way, separate from the family and shrouded in temporary secrecy. Simply put, protection. Had the others known about Oak Ridge, they would have done everything possible to control it, diminish your role, or pressure you into selling for their benefit. The $1 bequest in my public will was misdirection, a shield giving you time to secure your position before the inevitable family storm. By the time they discover the truth, everything will be legally settled. You are the future I choose for the resources I've built over a lifetime, Janie. Not because you're perfect, but because you're genuine. Not because you'll make the most money, but because you'll do the most good. Call Sophia today. Visit Oak Ridge. See what's possible. With all my love and complete confidence in you. Grandfather. P.S. The combination to the office safe is your birthday, something your father could never remember, but I never forgot. I sat completely still after finishing the letter, overwhelmed by what I'd just read. My grandfather hadn't just believed in me, he'd bet on me, planned for me, created a future that aligned with my values rather than my family's expectations. With unsteady hands, I opened the folders, scanning documents that confirmed everything the letter had described. Property deeds, business licenses, transfer certificates, tax documents, all naming me as the new owner of Oak Ridge Medical Center. The final folder contained financial statements showing healthy revenues, excellent community ratings, and a substantial operating reserve. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a viable, important healthcare facility now in my hands. When I finally emerged from the private room, Jenkins was waiting patiently. Everything in order, Miss Keller. Yes, I managed, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. Can you recommend a good attorney? Someone not connected to my family. Jenkins smiled. Your grandfather anticipated that request. There's a business card in the outer pocket of the largest folder. Regina Daniels is excellent and already familiar with the arrangements. Of course, grandfather had thought of everything. I thanked Jenkins and left the bank in a daze. The key to Oak Ridge clutched tightly in my hand. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed for Sophia Martinez. She answered on the second ring. Oak Ridge Medical Center. Sophia speaking. This is Jane Keller, I said, feeling strange saying my own name as if it now carried new weight. I believe you're expecting my call. There was a pause. Then warmth flooded Sophia's voice. Jane. Yes, absolutely. Your grandfather said you'd be contacting us this week. When can you come by? We arranged for me to visit that afternoon. As I drove toward the address Sophia provided, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my parents, then Ethan, then even Aunt Barbara. Word had clearly spread that I'd received a private letter, and family curiosity was reaching a boiling point. I ignored them all. This moment, this discovery, was mine alone. Oak Ridge Medical Center occupied a renovated former elementary school in a working-class neighborhood just outside Boston proper. The building had been beautifully repurposed, with the original brick exterior maintained, but modern medical facilities clearly visible through large windows. The parking lot was nearly full, a good sign for a healthcare facility. Sophia met me at the entrance, a Latina woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a confident handshake. Your grandfather spoke of you constantly these past 2 years, she said as she led me inside. He was determined to create something meaningful for you. The tour revealed a facility more impressive than I'd imagined, a urgent care center, primary care offices, a dental clinic, women's health services, and even a small pharmacy, all under one roof and designed to serve a community with limited healthcare access. We operate on a sliding scale fee structure, Sophia explained as we walked through bustling corridors. No one is turned away, but those who can pay do. Staff members nodded respectfully as we passed. A few seemed to recognize my name when Sophia introduced me, suggesting grandfather had mentioned me here too. Did everyone know about this transition? I asked as we entered Sophia's office. Only the senior management team, she replied. Your grandfather was very protective of this plan. He wanted everything legally secured before anyone in your family could interfere. In her office, Sophia showed me detailed operational reports, staff information, and the facility's 5-year strategic plan already in progress and apparently successful. This is overwhelming, I admitted after absorbing as much information as I could. I'm a nurse, not a healthcare administrator. Sophia's expression was kind but not pitying. Harold said you'd say exactly that. He also said you'd figure it out faster than anyone expected. She handed me a business card. This is our CFO. Between him, myself, and the clinical director, we handle the day-to-day operations. You can be as involved or as hands-off as you choose while you find your footing. As we concluded the tour, standing once again in the bright reception area, I watched patients coming and going, regular people receiving quality care in a facility that now belonged to me. Your grandfather believed in you completely, Sophia said quietly. He said you were the only one who understood that wealth was supposed to serve people, not the other way around. I felt tears threatening again, but held them back. I'm still not sure I'm qualified for this responsibility. Sophia smiled. That concern alone makes you more qualified than most. As I drove home that evening, my mind raced with possibilities. For the first time in my adult life, I felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond my daily nursing duties. Grandfather hadn't just left me a valuable asset, he'd entrusted me with a mission that aligned perfectly with my values. The question now was how long I could keep this development from my family, and what would happen when they inevitably discovered the truth. The next morning, I called in sick to my nursing shift for the first time in 3 years. My supervisor, Jean, was understanding. She'd known about grandfather's passing and the will reading. Take all the time you need, she said. Grief is unpredictable. It wasn't just grief keeping me from work, but she was right about unpredictability. In 24 hours, my life had transformed completely. My next call was to Regina Daniels, the attorney Jenkins had recommended. Her secretary scheduled an appointment for that afternoon, mentioning that Harold's matters were always given priority. I spent the morning reviewing the documents from the safe deposit box, trying to understand the full scope of what I'd inherited. Oak Ridge wasn't just a building, it was a comprehensive healthcare operation serving thousands of patients annually, employing over 40 staff members, and maintaining partnerships with several community organizations. The financial statements showed the facility was comfortably profitable while maintaining its community mission. Grandfather had structured it as a benefit corporation, a legal designation allowing it to prioritize social impact alongside financial returns. At 1 o'clock, I met Regina Daniels at her downtown office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Harold was one of my favorite clients, she said after introductions. Brilliant mind, clear ethics, rare combination in wealth management. For the next 2 hours, Regina walked me through the legal structures grandfather had created. The ownership transfer was ironclad, she assured me. My father and the rest of the family had no grounds to challenge it. Harold transferred these assets years before his death, placing them in a trust with you as beneficiary, she explained. The trust simply matured upon his passing. It's completely separate from the estate governed by his will. So the $1 inheritance was a brilliant tactical move, Regina finished, allowing herself a small smile. It gave your family exactly what they expected, you receiving almost nothing, while protecting the much more valuable assets he'd already designated for you. When will they find out? I asked. Oak Ridge files as a separate business entity. Unless someone specifically investigates your financial holdings, they won't automatically discover the connection. She leaned forward slightly. That said, secrets like this rarely remain secret forever. Harold's plan wasn't for permanent concealment, just long enough for you to establish yourself securely. I left Regina's office with a folder of additional documents and a growing sense of confidence. Grandfather hadn't just given me a valuable asset. He created a carefully constructed runway for me to take flight on my own terms. That evening, I returned to Oak Ridge for a scheduled meeting with the management team. Sophia had arranged for me to meet Dr. William Turner, the medical director, and Kevin Frost, the CFO. Both had been personally selected by my grandfather and briefed on the ownership transition. "Harold spoke very highly of you," Dr. Turner said as we gathered in the conference room. "He said you understood healthcare from the ground up, not just as a business." "I'm still wrapping my head around all this," I admitted. "Yesterday, I was a charge nurse. Today, I own a medical center. Ownership and management are different things." Kevin noted pragmatically. "The center runs efficiently with the current team. You can take time to decide how hands-on you want to be." Over the next 2 hours, they walked me through operations in greater detail, staffing challenges, community outreach programs, upcoming equipment needs, and expansion possibilities. The more they shared, the more I saw Grandfather's vision, a healthcare facility that balanced smart business practices with genuine community service. "There's one more thing Harold wanted you to see," Sophia said as our meeting concluded. She led me to a door marked storage near the back of the administration wing. The small key from the safe deposit box fit perfectly in the lock. Inside wasn't storage at all, but a fully furnished office with large windows overlooking a small courtyard garden. "Your office," Sophia said simply. Harold had it prepared 6 months ago. The space was beautiful, warm wood furnishings, comfortable seating, and built-in bookshelves already filled with healthcare management texts and community medicine resources. On the desk sat a framed photograph of Grandfather and me from my nursing school graduation, both of us beaming. "He visited weekly during the renovation," Sophia added, "always making little adjustments. The painting was the last addition." She gestured to a watercolor landscape on the wall, Walden Pond at sunrise, the fishing spot where Grandfather and I had spent countless peaceful mornings. "He said you'd recognize it immediately." I swallowed hard against the emotion rising in my throat. Even in his final arrangements, Grandfather had thought of personal touches that would make me feel connected to him and to this place. As Sophia left me alone to explore the office, I noticed a small safe built into the wall behind the desk. Following the instructions from Grandfather's letter, I entered my birthday as the combination. The door swung open to reveal a velvet jewelry box and another envelope. The box contained Grandfather's pocket watch, a Patek Philippe he'd worn daily for 40 years, its gold case engraved with his initials. The accompanying note was brief. "Time is the only true currency, Janie. Spend yours wisely with people who value you. This watch marked the hours of my life. May it remind you to make each of yours matter." I clasped the watch chain around my neck, the weight of it against my chest both unfamiliar and comforting. Whatever challenges lay ahead with the family, I carried tangible proof of Grandfather's faith in me. Before leaving Oak Ridge that evening, I made 2 decisions. I would take a leave of absence from my nursing position to focus on learning the business, and I would continue keeping my inheritance private from my family, at least until I felt secure in my new role. What I didn't know then was how quickly those plans would change. My phone displayed 17 missed calls by the time I left Oak Ridge that evening, 8 from my mother, 5 from my father, 3 from Ethan, and 1 from Aunt Barbara. The voicemails progressed from curious to concerned to distinctly annoyed. "Jane, darling, we're just wondering about that letter from your grandfather. Call me back. Jane, your mother and I expect you to return our calls promptly." This family discussion isn't finished. Jane Elizabeth Keller, your behavior is becoming concerning. We're having dinner tomorrow at 7. We expect you to attend. I deleted them all but texted Ethan. I'm fine. Just processing everything. Talk soon. The dinner invitation wasn't really an invitation. It was a summons. Under normal circumstances, I might have made an excuse. But part of me wanted to see them, to sit across the table knowing what I now knew while they remained in the dark. The following evening, I arrived at my parents' Brookline home exactly on time. The house where I'd grown up, still impressed with its grand facade and manicured landscaping, but now I saw it differently, as a showcase rather than a home. Designed to display wealth rather than nurture family. Jane, finally, my mother said as she opened the door, air kissing near my cheek. We were beginning to worry. She wore a casual outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite this being a family dinner. My father stood in the foyer behind her, martini already in hand. You've been avoiding our calls, he said by way of greeting. I needed some time alone, I replied, which wasn't untrue. Well, you're here now, my mother said brightly, steering me toward the dining room. Ethan's already arrived. My brother sat at the table looking uncomfortable, though his face brightened slightly when he saw me. He'd always been caught between genuinely caring about me and aligning with our parents' values, a tightrope he'd walked since childhood. How are you holding up? He asked quietly as I took the seat beside him. Better than expected, I answered truthfully. Dinner was served by Lucia, my parents' longtime housekeeper, another person who'd shown me more genuine care during my childhood than my actual parents. I made a point to thank her personally, earning a disapproving glance from my mother, who preferred staff to remain invisible. The meal progressed with superficial conversation until coffee was served. Then my father cleared his throat, setting down his cup with deliberate precision. Jane, it's time you told us what was in that letter from your grandfather. I took a slow sip of coffee. It was personal, Dad. We were shocked by your inheritance, darling, my mother interjected, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Only $1? It seemed so unlike your grandfather. As a family, we shouldn't have secrets, my father added, leaning forward. Harold was my father. Anything he communicated about family matters concerns all of us. I studied them both, these people who had raised me yet never really seen me, who had just received millions yet were fixated on what might have been written in a letter to me. The letter was private, I repeated. Grandfather wanted it that way. This is ridiculous, my father snapped, his facade cracking. Lawrence Wells had no right to create this secrecy. I've already consulted our attorneys about challenging these irregular proceedings. On what grounds? I asked, genuinely curious. Undue influence, possibly. Your grandfather was ill. His judgment may have been compromised. The suggestion that grandfather had been mentally unfit angered me more than I expected. He was perfectly lucid until the very end, I said, my voice sharper than intended. You'd know that if you'd visited him more than twice a month. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Ethan shifted in his chair, looking between us uncertainly. Jane, my mother tried again, switching tactics. We're simply concerned. A cryptic letter, your sudden unavailability. It's not like you. Actually, It's exactly like me, I countered. I've always valued privacy. You've just never respected it. My father's expression darkened. That's enough. I want to know what was in that letter. And I want to know now. What did my father say to you that he couldn't say to me, his own son? Something in his tone, the entitlement, the jealousy. The assumption that he deserved to know everything finally pushed me past caution. He told me the truth, I said evenly. About the family. About money. About values. What's that supposed to mean? My mother asked, her perfectly maintained smile faltering. It means, I continued, meeting my father's gaze directly. That grandfather saw what wealth had done to this family, and he made decisions accordingly. What decisions? My father demanded. I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I'd planned to reveal the truth, but perhaps there would never be a perfect moment. Grandfather left me Oak Ridge Medical Center, I said simply. He transferred it to a trust in my name years ago. It's worth nearly $4 million. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father froze completely, martini glass halfway to his lips. Even Ethan seemed stunned. That's impossible, my father finally managed. The will. The will covered the estate assets. I explained, recalling Regina's precise wording. The medical center was transferred outside the estate through a separate trust arrangement. For $1 million, my mother whispered, shock evident in her voice. A medical center, my father echoed, his tone suggesting he couldn't imagine anything less appealing. It's a community healthcare facility serving thousands of patients, I said, feeling a surge of pride. Grandfather established it specifically for me to carry forward. This can't be legal, my father declared, standing abruptly. Harold would never have done this without informing me. He did it precisely because he knew how you'd react, I replied. The paperwork is ironclad. I've already consulted with an attorney. You went behind our backs to an attorney. My mother looked genuinely betrayed by this development. I needed to understand my legal position. I said, just as you apparently consulted attorneys about challenging the will. My father paced the dining room, his controlled demeanor rapidly unraveling. I'll contest this. Family assets should remain within family control. It is in family control, I pointed out. My control. I am family, whether or not you've ever treated me that way. Ethan, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Dad, if grandfather arranged this legally, fighting it will just waste money and create bad blood. My father turned on him. You're taking her side? After everything we've invested in preparing you to lead this family. I'm not taking sides, Ethan said carefully. I'm suggesting we understand the situation before launching legal battles we might not win. My mother, ever practical when money was concerned, placed a restraining hand on my father's arm. Gary, perhaps we should consult with Lawrence before making any decisions. Lawrence Wells was clearly complicit in this deception, my father spat. We need independent counsel. The trust was established through Blackwell and Schmidt, I said, naming one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. Regina Daniels handled the arrangements. You're welcome to contact them. But the outcome won't change. My father stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not with newfound respect, but with the wary assessment one gives an unexpected opponent. Why would he do this? He finally asked, genuine confusion breaking through his anger. Why you and not Ethan? Not the family business? The question revealed so much about his worldview that I almost pitied him. In his mind, the only logical inheritance was one that built upon existing wealth and status. Because I'm not trying to be rich, I said quietly. I'm trying to do good. Grandfather recognized the difference. The remainder of the evening was tense and brief. My parents cycled through disbelief, anger, bargaining, and finally a cold acceptance that this situation wouldn't be easily changed. They suggested various compromises. Perhaps I could sell them the facility at a discount, or Ethan could manage the business aspects while I focused on patient care. I declined each proposal politely but firmly. By the time I left, it was clear that a fundamental shift had occurred in our family dynamic. I was no longer the overlooked daughter they could dismiss. I was now a power center they needed to acknowledge, even if they couldn't understand my priorities. In the driveway, Ethan caught up to me before I could drive away. I had no idea Grandfather was planning this, he said, looking both impressed and slightly envious. Neither did I admitted. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" With the medical center, I mean. The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. I think I will be, I said. It aligns with what I care about in a way that the family business never could for me. Ethan nodded slowly. I envy that, he said, so quietly I almost missed it. Knowing what you care about. As I drove home, I realized the confrontation had been necessary, painful but clarifying. The family would adjust to this new reality because they had no choice. There would be more difficult conversations, perhaps even legal challenges, despite the solid arrangements Grandfather had made. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt I was standing on ground of my own making, not territory grudgingly ceded by my family. Whatever came next, I would face it not as the family disappointment, but as the woman my grandfather had seen all along, capable, compassionate, and finally empowered to create impact on my own terms. 6 months passed in a blur of learning, growth, and transformation. What began as a shocking inheritance evolved into a purposeful mission that energized me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Oak Ridge Medical Center flourished under collaborative leadership. I divided my time between nursing shifts, which I refused to abandon completely, and growing into my role as owner and director. The management team Grandfather had assembled proved invaluable, guiding me through the business aspects while respecting my vision for patient care. Your grandfather would be proud, Sophia told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly performance. You've expanded services faster than even he projected. It was true. Within months, we'd added a mental health clinic, expanded pediatric services, and launched a mobile health unit serving elderly residents who couldn't easily travel to appointments. Each addition filled a community need while maintaining the center's financial stability. The staff, initially wary of a new owner, had embraced my hands-on approach. My nursing background gave me credibility in clinical discussions, while my willingness to learn the business side demonstrated commitment to the entire operation. You're not what we expected, Dr. Turner admitted during a staff appreciation event. Most healthcare facilities getting new ownership face cutbacks, not expansion. I'm not most owners, I replied with a smile. The truth was, Oak Ridge had become far more than an inheritance. It had become a calling. Each day brought challenges that stretched me professionally and personally, but also brought rewards that my previous nursing position never could. I wasn't just helping individual patients anymore. I was creating systems that improved thousands of lives. My family's response to this evolution was predictably complicated. My parents made 2 attempts to challenge the trust legally, both quickly dismissed by the courts. After the second failure, they shifted to a different strategy, reluctant acceptance paired with attempts to gain influence. You should consider taking the center public, my father suggested during one of our infrequent phone calls. I could help arrange the IPO. The valuation would be substantial. It's not about maximization, Dad. I explained for perhaps the 10th time. It's about mission. My mother tried a softer approach, suddenly interested in community healthcare and suggesting collaborative fundraisers that would inevitably center wealthy donors and photo opportunities rather than patient needs. I declined these offers gently but firmly, maintaining professional courtesy without sacrificing my autonomy. Regina Daniels had advised me well, be respectful but unyielding. They'll eventually accept the new reality. The most surprising development came from Ethan. 3 months after the inheritance revelation, he called asking to meet for coffee, not at our parents' home or a family-approved venue, but at a small cafe near Oak Ridge. I'm thinking of leaving the family business, he confessed once we were seated. I've never been happy there. Dad will be furious, I said, though without judgment. Ethan nodded tiredly. I know, but watching you these past months, you've found purpose. Real purpose. I want that too. What would you do instead? I asked. I've been volunteering with a microfinance organization, he revealed. Helping small entrepreneurs access capital. It feels more meaningful than shuffling family millions between accounts. Within weeks, Ethan had tendered his resignation from Keller Investments, triggering exactly the family crisis we'd anticipated. But something had shifted in him, a newfound resolve that reminded me of grandfather. He told me once that you were the only Keller worth a damn, Ethan shared over dinner one evening. I didn't understand then. I think I'm starting to now. As Oak Ridge approached its first anniversary under my leadership, I made a decision that felt both right and symbolic. We would rename the facility the Harold Keller Community Health Center, honoring the man whose vision had made it all possible. The renaming ceremony was small but meaningful. Staff, patients, and community partners gathered in the courtyard garden. I debated inviting my parents, but ultimately extended the invitation as an olive branch. To my surprise, they attended, standing stiffly in the back row. My grandfather believed healthcare was a right, not a privilege, I said during my short speech. He built his fortune through business acumen, but measured his success by the good he could do. This center represents his true legacy, not just to me, but to everyone who finds healing within these walls. After the ceremony, my father approached awkwardly, my mother beside him. It was a nice tribute he offered, which from him was significant acknowledgement. Thank you for coming, I replied sincerely. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before my mother spoke. We may not understand your choices, Jane, but she hesitated, seemingly struggling with unfamiliar territory. Your grandfather would have approved. It wasn't an apology or even full acceptance, but it was something, a small recognition that perhaps there were different valid paths in life, even if they couldn't fully embrace mine. As they left, I noticed my father pause briefly before the portrait of grandfather we'd hung in the main lobby. For just a moment, his expression softened into something resembling regret before his usual mask of confidence returned. The distance between us remained, but it had evolved from active conflict to a mutual recognition of profound differences. We would never be close, but we had reached a fragile peace, one I could live with while building my own life and legacy. That evening, alone in my office, I took out grandfather's pocket watch and held it in my palm, feeling its comfortable weight. The engraved initials caught the last rays of sunset through my window, gleaming warmly in the fading light. "You were right," I said aloud to the empty room. To the grandfather who had seen me so clearly. About everything. The true inheritance hadn't been the medical center, though its value was undeniable. The true inheritance was freedom from toxic family expectations, freedom to create impact aligned with my values, freedom to become fully myself without apology or compromise. Grandfather's final gift hadn't been wealth but wisdom, the understanding that real legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in ripples, the lives touched, the systems improved, the positive changes that continue long after we're gone. As I look back now on that day in the attorney's office, when my family laughed at my $1 inheritance, I can't help but smile at the journey that followed. That single dollar represented the most valuable lesson. True worth isn't determined by others' assessments, but by the courage to live according to your own measure of success. Sometimes the most precious inheritances aren't the ones listed in wills or tallied in bank accounts. Sometimes they're the values passed down. The belief someone holds in you when you struggle to believe in yourself. The quiet confidence that you'll use resources wisely when finally entrusted with them. Have you ever received a gift that changed your perspective on what really matters? Or found purpose in a place you never expected? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button to support more stories about finding meaning beyond material success. Remember, we all have the power to create ripples that reach farther than we might ever know.